then we'll head out to the brick house, where we'll talk about how we age our bourbon. That's also a big part of our uniqueness. You may have noticed that we use single-story brick houses.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yes. Yeah. It is a important factor when it comes to crafting the bourbon, the aging process. So we will talk about that. But first, I want to answer a very common question. That's how did your brand get the name Four Roses? It comes up a lot. Why is your brand called Four Roses, right? So you're in luck. I get paid to tell you the story, so that's what I'm going to do. But this story begins with our founder, Paul Jones Jr. in the 1880s. All right, so he fell in love with this beautiful Southern belle. So he decided one day he was going to ask her hand in marriage. He was smitten by her, and he decided he's going to write up a marriage proposal and send it off with a personal courier, as custom of the time. And that's what he did. So he sent it to this young lady. She read it and replied with an astounding maybe. Yeah. She said that if her answer was yes, she would wear a corsage and roses on her gown to this upcoming grand ball that they'd be attending. Right? So legend has it, Paul Jones Jr. arrived the night of the grand ball. He waited nervously and excitedly to see what her answer was going to be, and his heart skips a beat when she arrives in her beautiful gown wearing a corsage of 4 red roses, signifying that her answer was in fact yes. So he later named his bourbon Four Roses as a symbol of his devout passion for his lovely wife, and how his passion therefore transferred into making his bourbon. That's our legend. We're sticking to it. Makes for a nice story, right?
It does.
Four Roses was established in 1888. We've been around for quite some time. Since then, we survived Prohibition, 2 world wars, witnessed all those moon landings, and a lot more. We survived Prohibition because we were one of 6 distilleries that remained operational during that era. Under the Frankfurt Distilling Company, we sold our bourbon for medicinal purposes, and here at Four Roses, we still recommend that to this day. It's great medicine. We actually have 2 original prescription bottles of Four Roses bourbon in our cabinet here around the corner. One of those prescription bottles used to have the original dosage recommendations on the prescription pad from the doctor. It is now in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, where our distillery is. But it read, take 2 ounces, repeat as often as necessary until you feel better. That's the kind of advice we got from your doctor back in the day. And I still follow that doctor's orders to this day. Responsibly, right? But however often. That's Prohibition. Moving forward, Four Roses remained in the Jones family until 1943. That's when our brand was purchased by another well-known brand by the name of Seagram's and Sons. You may have heard of Seagram's, right? So we were the #1 bourbon seller in the United States in the 30s, 40s, and moving into the 50s. However, in the mid-50s, bourbon sales started to kind of dwindle and die off. Americans were moving toward lighter whiskeys and gins and vodkas and clear spirits. So in 1958, Seagram's made the executive decision to make our bourbon an export-only product. It was positioned for sales in a rapidly growing European and Asian market. Our product hit the shelves overseas. We became the top seller overseas, and we actually still hold that around today. We're very proud of that. The top seller for bourbon. But you cannot get Four Roses bourbon in the United States anymore, so Seagram's produced a Four Roses blended whiskey that replaced our bourbon on the shelves here in the United States of America. From what I understand, it started off pretty well, but it didn't keep that up for long. It did the job for cheap, but didn't taste good going down, is what I understand. All right, so that trend continued till February 2002 when our brand was purchased by Keurig Brewing Company. That's who owns us today. They renamed our brand Four Roses Distillery LLC, and then in 2003 they returned our beloved bourbon back to the United States, starting with our story, Four Roses bourbon, formerly known as Four Roses Yellow Label. We replaced the label, put a cork in it because corks are classy and unpretentious, but it's the same juice that's in the bottle. 2004 the single barrel came along, 2006 the small batch, and then in 2019 our first new addition in the last 12 years, our small batch select. It's our 4th rose. Those are the 4 that we're going to try today. I'm going to talk more about those bottles in greater detail as we move into the tasting in a little bit. But for now, that's our history. All right, so let's move on to our recipes. We have a visual aid right over here that we're going to be following along based off of this. I'm going to break down these recipes. All right, so 2 mash bills, 5 proprietary strains of yeast. It takes 1 mash bill and 1 strain of yeast to make 1 recipe. Here at Four Roses, we use 10 recipes to craft our bourbon. That's pretty unique in the industry. Most places use 2 or 3. We have a lot of options using 10. There's a pyramid of barrels at the top with a 4-letter recipe code stamped on them. So I am going to break that down for you so you know what you're looking at, right? So that first letter is always an O. It stands for Old Apprentice. That is what we used to call the distillery back in the day. The Four Roses Distillery, formerly known as Old Apprentice Distillery, right? So that just means Four Roses made it. We don't source our whiskey from anybody. We make it ourselves. The second letter is an E or a B. That is your mash bill. Our E mash bill is 75% corn, 20% rye, 5% malted barley. Our B mash bill is 60% corn, 35% rye, 5% malted barley. That's one of the higher rye contents you can get from bourbon on the market. So hopefully you all like rye, because we're bringing it, right? The third letter, the S, stands for straight whiskey. It means it was aged at least 2 years. So here at Four Roses, we won't quote anything older than 5. Our average is about 5.5, 6 years. Then the last letter is your strain of yeast, B, K, O, Q, or F. Each strain of yeast produces its own unique flavors and aromas. And to the right, we have a little descriptor telling you a general term for some of those flavors and aromas you can get from the yeast. So V for delicate fruits like crisp fruits like apples, pears, peaches. K for light spice like baking spices. O for rich fruits like ripened berries and cherries. Q, floral essence, honeysuckle, lavender. F for herbal notes, candied fruits, and apricot. Lingering spearmint. Let's see how those recipes mingle together. See if we can pick out any of those notes. Feel free to call them out. We're moving into the tasting, all right? So hopefully you're all ready for the best part. The distilleries in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky is already up and running. They don't have room to age there. Our stuff is already aging here, and we don't have a fresh water source for the mash here. So they tank the distillate down to us. We get 4 tankers daily, Monday through Friday. Each tanker holds 6,500 gallons of distillate. We fill about 540 barrels a day. So we proof it down to 120, put it in the barrel. It officially becomes bourbon. Put in the rick houses, aged, and the rest is history, right? So there's 24 of these single-story rick houses situated across 298 acres. Each rick house sits on an acre of land, and at maximum capacity can hold up to 24,000 barrels of bourbon. Those are 53-gallon barrels. The first rick house on the property built was Rick House C because we had too much to drink that day, but we do have an A and a B now. I'm kidding. They were working on all 3 of them at the same time. C just got done first. July 1960 it was completed. August that same year, they put the first barrel in for storage, and those were completed right around the 1st of August. So it just beat the other ones out. I guess that crew was just a little faster. We're going to go into Rick House C and talk about why we use single-story rick houses. So keep in mind that little base label code. Every rick house has that letter designation, either a north and south or an east and west entry point, depending on the orientation of the building. Each entry contains 90 ricks stacked 6 high, and then they go 22 to 23 deep. The new ones go 23 deep, and I'll show you all when we go inside. So this one only goes 22. It's A through V.
Heaven.
Hallowed ground, aren't we?
Yep. Yes, we are.
All right, so you may notice as you walk in here that these brick houses don't feel like they're temperature controlled. That's because they're not. We rely on the outside ambient temperature for the aging process. Kentucky has some wild weather, and we want that wild weather. It rapidly ages our product. In the middle of spring, we have dogwood winter, and then it gets hot again. We have blackberry winter. We have summers where it's over 100 degrees, winters where it's below 0, and this really makes the bourbon happy. The aging process is, in my opinion, the most important process when it comes to producing a bourbon. The barrels are very important. We use barrels sourced from Independent Stave Company. They have a location in Lebanon, Missouri and Lebanon, Kentucky. We use American white oak barrels with a level 4 charts, 43 to 46 seconds in the fire. So if you all want to pass this around, take note of this brown line. That's how deep the bourbon soaks into the wood. So we'll start here. Y'all can move it down and then send it over here to Bill. You check it out. So as the temperature is changing, when it's hot, the bourbon soaks into the wood like a sponge. When it gets cold, the barrels constrict and they squeeze the bourbon back out, and it passes in and out of that char layer. So the barrel is so important that 100% of the color of bourbon comes from the barrel, and roughly 70% of the flavor comes from the barrel. That's where your maple syrups and caramel, brown sugars, coffee, butterscotch, all that comes from the barrel. they roll the barrels in on this track system because they weigh about 500 pounds when they're full, onto a device that we call a ricker, which is basically a forklift with a flat platform. The barrel is loaded onto that flat platform, and the ricker rider, I'm not making up terms, that's what their job title is actually called, they're able to lift that platform to whatever tier they want to put the barrel in, and an employee will get in between the ricks, receive the barrels, and help guide them back. They will chalk them in place, and that's where they stay. Because we have a very minimum temperature variation in the single-story rick houses, that's why we like to use them. Between the bottom and top barrel, there's only a 6 or 7 degree temperature difference on average, 8 at the most. And the multi-story facilities that you've seen in the area can be 30 or 40 degrees. So we don't rotate our barrels, we don't have to worry about weight distribution. We can pull from one area of the rick house and not worry about it collapsing. So those are the benefits. The cons are we need more land, so there's 298 acres we're building across right here. So we have the aging down pat pretty well. We got it figured out to a science so that we can give consistent bourbons. Every barrel is still going to be a little bit different because these barrels are handmade. The staves, some are thicker, some are thinner. There's more staves in some barrels than others, and that's going to affect things, as well as where it's placed in the rick house. Around the walls and doors is going to get warmer and cooler faster. The center of the rick house is going to maintain more of a temperature because of thermal mass. So these are things that you can think about when you're getting a single barrel. And then the small batches are fairly consistent because they're mingling recipes together to achieve a flavor profile, and they're pretty good at it. We do no less than 354 quality checks on every single batch of bourbon from the ring to bottle before it gets to you. So we ensure that you have the best product that we're able to provide. The barrels have been placed, 3 years pass. They come in and they take samples for quality analysis. So we don't have enough room usually for a thief tool to go into the barrel. So what we do is we drill into the barrels with a drill, catch the samples, it spurts out into a little glass flask, and they plug that hole that they drilled with those little wooden pegs you see there. Those are called stipes. It's a little poplar peg. We use poplar because it swells, creates a nice seal. They'll send that sample off to the lab where some poor soul drinks it, decides if it's coming along really well. That's right, not all heroes wear capes. It's a rough job for sure, right? Yeah, so they'll try it and make sure it's coming along really nicely. As it sits here and it's getting closer to time to pull it, they'll sample it a few more times and they'll pull it when it tastes like it's ready. That's the reason why we will tell you a minimum of 5 years or a minimum of 6 years, because if it's not ready at 6, we'll let it go 7 or 8.
And you guys check all along the middle there on the inside, right?
Yeah, they'll crawl in between the ricks here, and then they'll drill into the heads. Now, on the small batches, they'll spot check throughout the years. They won't do every single barrel at once. They'll check one, and then they'll go back 3 and check another. Single barrels get checked, every one of those, because it's a single barrel, right? So some of these barrels, you might see multiple little pegs sticking out of them. These would be barrels that maybe didn't taste like they're ready quite yet, and they're just checking it, and they'll pull it when it's ready, or maybe it's something that's really impressed them, and they're just going to have a little sample once in a while. So behind me are the oldest barrels in this brick house. They're around about 20 years. They pulled several for this year's limited edition. There was a barrel right here that had 25 little pegs sticking out of it, and it was an empty barrel, so they drained it dry. So I guess it has its perks, right?
Yep.
They left a few for maybe a special occasion to commemorate something, or like an anniversary or something like that. So you want to check those barrels out and take a look. They'll pull the barrels out the same way that they came in. The small batches and the Four Roses bourbon goes down to the bulk building where it gets dumped and then sent over to our, it gets pumped underground and put into some holding tanks in our bottling line. The single barrels go straight to the bottling line and are dumped there. After the barrels are dumped, we can't use them again. We can only use the barrels once, so we do sell them to our customers Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. They're $80 for a used barrel. And that's a fresh dump barrel as well. There's a winery down the road that comes and buys several barrels. It's called Forest Edge. They age some of their wine in our old bourbon barrels. There's several breweries that come and buy them. And then we have a broker that we sell the remainder barrels to. They break them down, palletize them, send them overseas to age other spirits in, like Scotch, rum, Irish whiskey, and stuff like that.